Good day, grade 12, and welcome to the second literature lesson that I've got planned for you. Today we are going to be discussing The Village People, and this is a short story by Bessie Head. And I've actually got a little slide that I'd like you to read about Bessie Head before we start. So, Bessie Head didn't know her real parents. She was an unstable white woman and an unknown black man. She was born and raised in apartheid South Africa. She suffered from poverty, racial segregation, gender discrimination, and she had to worry about her own delicate nervous balance. As a young woman, she left South Africa to come to Botswana, and she lived the rest of her life in the country, mostly in Sarowe. Bit by bit, she overcame her many formidable obstacles. Why do you think it's important that you know a little bit about Bessie Head? Well, if you had watched one of the previous recordings, you would have noticed that understanding the historical background and understanding the setting and understanding the people involved make it so much easier for you to understand what the story is about and why the author has chosen to write about those particular things. Now, where do we look at the story that we're going to cover today, which is called The Village People? Okay, you are going to notice that it's about poverty, but more importantly, it is about how human kindness, human nature, and our love for one another, our empathy, our sympathy, and the kindness that we feel eventually comes through and helps us to deal with these various obstacles. So the first essay, this story is divided into three little things, okay, three little sections. And the first one is an essay, and then you've got the two stories. Okay, so let's look at the slide, the next one. Okay, so if you look at the top there, it says poverty has a home in Africa, okay, and it gives you some statistics. And if you look at what's written next to that, it says, people do not look down at your shoes, which are caked with years of mud and split so that the toes stick out. Now, let's just unpack that a little bit. Poverty has a home in Africa. Okay, the next line, now that is the first line in the essay. Okay, and the next line says, it is worn like a quiet second skin. Now, the title of this story is called The Village People. The first line here says that poverty has a home in Africa. Now, when you think of the word home, what do you think of? What does the word home make us all think of? Well, for me, the word home makes me think of a place that I'm comfortable in. Okay, a place where I go at the end of a long day, the place where I live, the place where family is. Okay, so there is this sort of connotation to the word home. But this sentence says that poverty has a home in Africa. It does not say poverty lives in Africa, poverty has a house in Africa. It says poverty has a home in Africa. So you need to understand that when the author chooses those words, why would she choose those words? You need to understand the connotation of the word home. So poverty is everywhere in Africa. Okay, it has a home. It lives there. That is where poverty goes if it wants to be sort of at ease. But the next line says, like a quiet second skin. So, is a second skin comfortable? If you look at your own skin, you've got your skin, and it's fine, and you're comfortable in it. When you hurt yourself and you get a little scab, something grows over your skin, a second skin is not comfortable. When you think about soccer players, and they wear these tight things, like, it's called literally a second skin, a quiet second skin. The idea of something on top of your skin, okay, is not always an idea of comfort. It doesn't engender thoughts of being comfortable. But when people wear a second skin, or when people have a second layer of skin, it normally is there for a reason. Okay? It offers something, some sort of protection, some sort of a barrier. So now you need to sit back and ask yourself, poverty has a home in Africa, like a quiet second skin. So as much as poverty lives in Africa, okay, it does not mean that the people who are experiencing the poverty are comfortable with it, are welcoming this poverty. So there's an idea of both ease and unease just in that sentence. Okay? So you need to, grade 12, remember, every short story has the same elements. We've got the title, we've got the plot, we've got themes, we've got characters, we've got characterization, and we've got the narrator. What is also important are the words in the story. How are the words used? What are the images and the messages that those words wish to convey? So, one thing that I haven't mentioned is the idea of a theme. So when you think of a theme, it's a universal message. And when you look just at the first sentence of the story that says, poverty has a home in Africa like a quiet second skin, what is the theme that emerges there for you? Think of that. For me, it is anything that we are used to, but that we are not genuinely or naturally comfortable with. So just because we are used to it doesn't mean that we welcome it. And that's what poverty is to people in Africa. People, if you look at if you remember the slide, it says that people do not look down at your feet, which are caked with years of mud and split so that the toes stick out. So what is it that the people look at? So when you are poor, and this is for in Africa, people have learned to look at what matters and not at the outside. So people they look at what it is that poverty has caused. And poverty has caused people to overlook the external. So what is it that they are looking at? They are looking at the internal. If you look at that picture, what is it that you would think when you see someone with broken shoes? What would we think? We would judge. But the author in her story says that people don't look at that. People look beyond that. They don't care that that is because everyone is experiencing that type of poverty to an extent, to a degree. So they don't judge one another because of it. Okay, so because poverty has a home there, so many people are used to it that they are starting to look beyond the external, and they are starting to make different types of connections. So when they're not looking at your broken shoes, where are they looking? They are looking at your eyes. Why? Remember the saying, eyes are the window to the soul? So they're trying to make out by looking at your eyes, are you enemy, and this is from the story, are you friend or foe? Are you an enemy or are you someone they can trust? And they don't look at your appearance for that. They look at your eyes. And that is why this is such a beautiful story. And I'm not going to give too much about it away because I need you to go and reread. Remember, I said the structure. We've got the essay, then we've got the two stories, okay? And this is the first one. It's called The Old Woman, and then the next one is called, I'm not going to tell you. Must I tell you? The African Sun. That's correct. So, if you look at the picture of the baby, now, and I'm going to keep this the slide on because I'm going to speak to the slide. So, if we look at the baby, in the second story, okay, we know that the young girl, her sister has a baby and they don't have enough food, okay? Just bear that in mind. If you look at what it says there, it says, babies die most easily of starvation and malnutrition. Why? Because there's not enough food. That is what poverty in Africa looks like. Those are pictures of poverty in Africa. So look at the houses. That's where people live. Look how dry and arid it seems. Okay, so there's no running water close by. There are no crops growing. There's nothing that they can really do. So they are living at the mercy of the elements, okay, because they are poor. There's no way for them to go and make money to be able to sort themselves out, to look after their families. We live and survive by making as few demands as possible. This is from the story, Grade 12. Please remember that. Do we really retain the right to develop slowly, admitting change only insofar as it keeps pace of our limitations? Or does change descend on us as a calamity? So she's saying that they don't make a lot of demands, because if you make demands, there's an expectation that those demands will be met. But they live in such abject poverty that they can't really ask for anything. Okay? And then the next one, she says, do we really retain the right to develop slowly, admitting change only insofar as it keeps pace of our limitations? So, keeping pace of our limitations, what are we able to do? So, because this is what we are able to do, we need to change at a slower pace, because we can't keep up with change. We can't keep up with the pace of change. Okay? Or does change descend on us as a calamity? The word calamity means a disaster. So she's saying, when things change, is it disastrous for us, or are we able to, allow change to happen? And the fact that because of poverty, they are not allowing themselves to develop, or they are not allowed to develop as sort of at an acceptable rate. And that when change does come, it's disastrous for them, because we don't know what to do, because we've been living with this poverty for so long. So poverty is not just not having food, or not having running water, or not having things. Poverty is so much more than that, because it speaks to who we are. Okay? She says, so when change does come, are we going to be able to deal with it? Because we have become so used to not having. When we have this opportunity to have and to develop and to grow, are we going to know what to do with it? And that is directly related to the fact that poverty has kept them back from education, from moving forward, from growth, from development. And so the way in which they think has been affected by that, because they've become so used to not having that they don't know how to respond to the idea of having. And she's saying, is it going to be disastrous when this change comes, and what do we do now? Okay? And that is an effect of poverty on the people who experience it. So this is the first story. So you remember the old woman. So they say, old ladies have no more shame left. They are like children. They give way to weakness and cry openly when they are hungry. So the story of the old woman. So the old woman is the one who is in the village and she cries. And then people's like, what's wrong with her? And someone says, she's sick. And the old woman says, I'm not sick. I'm hungry. So she is willing to admit, while she's crying, I need to eat. So she's hungry and she's thirsty and she needs to be fed. And like a child, this old woman is honest about that, okay? And she says, that is what I need. Give me sustenance. Give me something to eat. And there's absolutely no idea of, I'm too proud to ask for food. I don't want to expose myself that way. So she has become like a child again. And she says, this is what I need. And what happens? We know that one of the villagers comes and she says, go to my hut and I will arrange that you get something to eat. And so the old woman goes, and someone at the hut arranges that the old woman is fed. Now, the behavior of the young woman when she says, what's wrong? First of all, characterization. She shows concern for what is wrong with the old woman. Okay? The old woman's response, someone in the village says, she's sick. And the old woman says, No, not sick, hungry, thirsty. So their characterization, once again, the honesty of what the old woman needs. Now, if you think back to the previous picture, the broken shoes and the people not judging you by that, the old woman is also evidence of, listen, I'm honest, I'm open, I need food. I've lost all airs and graces, and I need you to help me with this. Okay? And she cries because she's hungry. Who else does that? Who else cries when they are hungry? Children do that. Okay? So this old woman has absolutely no pretense. And just like a child, she says, feed me. This is what I need. So, remember I spoke about characterization, the old woman and her honesty, and the young woman who says, take her to my hut and we will get her something to eat. So what does that tell us about the character of the young woman that gives her food? How many times have you seen someone who is hungry or thirsty, or someone at a traffic light and you look the other way like you don't see them? Okay? And those are indicative, those actions are indicative of our character. But in this short story, the young woman says, go, and I will make sure that you get food. And that is indicative of her. So she's willing to share what little she does have. Because remember, the very first line of this poem says, poverty has a home in Africa. So the old woman might have less, but it's not as if the young woman who's going to feed her is rich and has that much more. But she's willing to share what she has with the old woman. And that speaks a lot about her. And then they say, old ladies have no more shame left. They are like children. They gave way to weakness and they cry openly. Okay? And if you look at the picture of the young woman in this slide, remember when the old woman is fed, a young woman comes to say thank you to the woman who has fed her. But this young woman who comes, she does not make eye contact with the woman. Okay, let me maybe just go back to the back slide, to the previous slide. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to continue. She comes and she sits there. Okay, I'm going to show you how she sits. She sits and she looks away. And the woman who has now fed the old woman, she says like, why is this girl sitting here? She asks the neighbor, what's up? Like, why? I don't understand. And then the neighbor speaks to the girl and she says like, what are you doing here? And the girl says, she fed my relative. She gave my relative food. Guys, remember, Africa has a home in poverty has a home in Africa. So this young girl comes and she's got the water on her head and she says, you know what, this is all that we have to say thank you. Now, remember, there's a food shortage. There's water scarcity. The old woman is hungry. The young woman feeds her. Then the girl comes and she brings the water. And in order to thank the woman who has fed her relative. No one has much of anything. But what is coming through clearly is humanity. That is at the heart of people's interactions when we are all in the same boat. And in this instance, the same boat that they are sharing is the boat of poverty. Okay? And so when the old woman says, I'm hungry, she's lost all pretense. She says, yeah, I am. I need food. And then the young woman says, well, what can I do? I can feed you. So that's what she does. Then the young woman comes with the water on her head. She says, you fed my relative. She never makes eye contact. Now, when you think about that, when the neighbor asks her, what are you doing here? She responds and she says, she fed my relative and all we have to give her is water. And she brings this water, but she does not make eye contact. And for me, that is very it's interesting because I asked myself when I read the story, why does she answer the neighbor, but she doesn't answer the person who fed her relative? And if you think about that, you need to ask yourself, because this speaks to characterization, was she embarrassed that they had nothing else to give but water? Was it a matter of respect that caused her to not want to make eye contact. Okay, and if you are able to say, based on what's going on in the text, that those are the answers, then you must be able to back it up. Okay, back it up from what's happening in the text. That's very important. So if we think about the first story, we think about the old woman, we think about the broken shoes, we think about people are not judged for that, we think about how they, how they look at the eyes to determine if you are friend or foe, and we look at the action of the young woman, we look at the action of the girl with the water on her head and the old woman. And what do we see? What do we see? We see authentic behavior, authentic reactions of people. And what are those authentic reactions in the face of poverty? It's human kindness, it's empathy, it's sympathy, it's caring, it's help, it's respect. So those are the themes that emerge in the face of poverty in that particular village and that particular aspect of the short story. Okay, the next one is called The Summer Sun. Very interesting. So all day long I lie asleep under the thorn tree, and the desert is on this side of me and on that side of me. I have no work to do. We are all waiting for the rain. Right, so this young girl lives with a family, and they are in an area where there's no rain. So the entire day, what they do is they sit under the tree for shade. Why? Because there's nothing that they can do. Okay, it is too hot to do anything. Okay, and I'm basically just going to tell you the story, and I'll show you a few pictures as we go along, because I need you to understand what the emergent themes are in these stories. Remember, the first one was one of love, care, empathy, respect, sharing what we have with one another. Now this one's a little bit different. Okay, so she says they sit under the thorn tree all day because it's too hot to do anything. Literally, can you imagine that? It's too hot to do anything. The desert is everywhere. So they find shade so that night can come. Because remember, in this story, the sun scorches everything that is exposed to it. So even the people. So people are not outside. They are sitting under little trees trying to stay in whatever shade they have. And this young girl lives with her family. Okay, a sister, a grandfather, and an uncle, and whatever, and they can't really do anything during the day. And in the village, there's this man. They have a politician. They call him the one who has shaken God loose. Okay, and this is the person who sort of prays for rain. But does it come? Not necessarily. So why do they call him the one who has shaken God loose? Because probably that's how actively he prays. And then the girl says that in Africa, things are changing and girls need to get educated. And we know that her cousin has given her a geography book. And when she reads this geography book, she reads about rain and how rain is made. But the geography book is also significant of something else. It expands her borders. She realizes that there is more to life, more to the world than the area that she is living in. So that geography book is a symbol of the expanded world, of everything above the borders of the little village where she finds herself. Okay, I'm going to show you a little picture of the gentleman. Let's just go back. Okay, so now the one thing that the family does have, okay, is love for one another. I do not know what we would do if we all did not love one another. She does not know what they would do. Now, when do they share that family love? So, remember now, during the day, they sit in the shade and they can't do anything. They're not even together with one another, okay? They are spread apart. At night, they sit together, okay? And they sit together under the night sky as a family. And they chat. And Grandpa and Labena chat. and she sits with her sister's baby, and the baby giggles and coos, and her mother cooks the goat, and all of these things are happening under the very same sky that during the day they were unable to get together under. Why? During the day, there was the sun, and the sun was a murderous sun. It was shining down on them, and they scattered to find shade. And at night, when the sun disappears and the moon appears and the stars appear, they sit there under that same African sky, and they are together as a family. They are united as a family. And she listens to the chatter of her uncle and her grandfather, and she looks at the little baby, and her mother's cooking the goat. Now, do you remember the significance of the goat? Why goats survive? They survive because they don't need to be fed, and they can be eaten. So the goat has dual value. They go and often find their own food, and then when the family needs to be fed, that's exactly what they can eat, the goats, okay? And this young girl, because of the geography book that she's gotten from her cousin, has decided that she's going to educate herself. She's going to study. She's going to go above the borders of the village. She's not going to be like her sister. She's not going to fall pregnant and have a baby. Okay, and there's a very significant part of the story where they speak about when a baby dies, there's nothing that they can really offer the mother. So they sit with her. And what does it mean to sit with someone quietly? It means that you are sharing their grief. Okay, and so there is this. Please don't imagine that what I'm doing is unrelated. All the things I'm talking about are woven throughout the stories, okay? They are woven throughout the essay. That idea of togetherness, the idea of assistance, the idea of helping, the idea of, for lack of a better term, Ubuntu, is woven throughout the stories, and that is what comes out of the idea of poverty. You can decide to accept it, or you can decide to grow beyond it. You can decide to be like everyone else, or you can decide to be different. She says she's not going to be like a sister. She's not going to fall pregnant and then not be able to feed her child. So her sister, now remember, they come from one family, but they've chosen to react to this in two different ways. So they live in Africa where poverty has a home, but they are not reacting to that in the same way. The one ends up with a baby, the other one decides, that's not for me. I love the baby, but I'm going to further my studies. And where does that start? With her uncle giving her this geography book. So she decides to improve her English, improve her reading skills, and what does that do? It opens up the world for her, and she decides that she is going to take that opportunity to be better. Okay, so if we look at the picture on the screen, then we see them sitting together. Now that togetherness, okay, she speaks about that togetherness, and she says that it's when her grandfather and Rebena, when they talk, then it just brings heaven and earth together. The harmony that it brings is important, and that is what they feel when they sit together at night under the African sky, right? So where does the story take place? It takes place in Botswana, rural farming village. When? So remember, setting is time and place. So where? In Botswana, farming village. When? Time of heavy drought, very little development in the rural areas. So now, grade 12, we are getting into the setting of the story. What we've already done is we've looked at, we've sort of dissected the stories, and now we are looking at the elements of the story. So the more exam literature type of things that you need to know. Okay, so that's where both of these stories and the essay is set. The structure, and I've spoken about this. We've got 3 stories within the short story. So it's the essay, and the essay describes the levels of poverty in the village. Then we've got the old woman, and we've got the summer sun. What happens with the old woman? She collapses, okay? And what is focused on in the story? the level of kindness and humanity despite difficult times. So everything that I've said now, I'm going to just basically go through the slides with you quickly so that you can understand where it fits in. Summer sun, the details levels of hopefulness that the villagers have. So remember, we spoke about the family talking and her wanting to go and study. So that is what unfolds in the summer sun. All right, the next one. So the narrator, first person narrator. What does that mean? It means that the person is part of what is happening. She's the main character and the hero in the story of the old woman. She reflects on her surroundings and future. Member of extended family, has first-hand experience of poverty in the village. So the narrator is at the heart of everything that is happening. Okay? She's the hero. She's the one who gives the water. She reflects on what is happening. So the narrator is the person who experiences all of these things and tells us about it. Okay. Now, who is the main character? The narrator. She is the young woman who shows care and she shows love for the village people. Okay. Hopeful individual. How do we know that she's hopeful? She believes that education can carry her above and beyond the poverty that the villagers are experiencing. Young woman, she shows care. How do we know that she shows care? She gives the water to the old woman. She helps the villagers. She loves the villagers. She shows compassion. So we can't just say something without going into the text and finding evidence to back it up. Right. Let's move on to the next one. The themes are poverty, drought, humanity, and hope. Grade 12, remember, we discussed the idea of what themes are. Themes are universal messages, things that we can all relate to. So the theme of poverty in this short story, The Village People, which means the entire, the essay and the two little short stories within it, is poverty. Who suffers from poverty? The village people are poverty-stricken. So we need to know with the themes. Remember, I spoke about this earlier, and here I've shown you. If you say that there is a theme, you need to relate it to the characters in the story. So all the villagers are poverty-stricken. Drought, all the villagers have to endure dry and hot weather in the desert. Remember, they all go and hide under little trees during the day, and at night they can't come out. Humanity. The villagers care for one another despite the poverty. And how is that care showed? There's no judgment, okay? They give one another food and water when they are able to. She looks after her sister's babies. Her mother cooks for all of them. So you need to understand that when you discuss a particular theme, you need to understand who are the people involved, and you need to show evidence of that coming from the text. And then we've got the theme of hope. What are they hoping for? Well, they are hoping that it's going to rain. They are waiting for that. Why? Because they've got this fertile ground. They've got the seeds. They've got everything that they need to be able to grow food for themselves. The only thing they don't have is rain. So they are waiting for rain. So does that not also tell you that they are patient? Because they've got everything. So they're patient and hopeful, because when the rain comes, they'll be able to feed themselves. Also, when the narrator reads that geography book, what does she decide to do? She decides, I'm going to further my education. So she wants to improve herself. And when we decide, I'm going to improve myself, okay, it shows that we have hope for our future. And that is what it shows with this young lady. Grade 12. This short story, okay, with the 3 sections, okay, with these themes and the characters, is one of the more maybe difficult, I should say, okay? And what I would like you to do is I would like you to use the slides so that you go over them and you marry what I've said to you and with the slides that are available to you, and read through the short story using what you've learned today in the back of your mind. Just keep it in the back of your mind, okay? And go and reread the short story. Do yourselves a favor. Remember, we've spoken about unpacking the story. So do that. Unpack the story, remembering that there's things like poverty, there's drought, there's humanity, there's hope, there's the young girl, there's the geography book. Ask yourself, what are these things indicative of? Why a geography book? Why not a biology book, for example? Okay, why did this author choose those particular symbols to be able to explain certain things to us? So, this lesson hasn't been a usual lesson, okay? Because what I've tried to do is I've tried to pick little things out of it for you. And what I need you to do is I need you to take these things that I've picked out and tie them together so that eventually you can use the information that I've given you to be able to answer questions on all the elements of the themes. Final reminder before I go. Elements are themes, character, characterization, title, narrator, and plot. Grade 12, that concludes the lesson for now on the village people, and I trust that you have enjoyed it. Thank you so much.